When you're a famous rock star at the height of your career, the wave of success might seem endless, but everyone knows nothing lasts forever, and many musicians aren't exactly brilliant at saving up that nest egg. Here are the rockers who went completely broke, and a few who clawed their way back. English bad boy rocker Pete Doherty founded the rock band the Libertines in 1997, and when the group banned him from playing due to his drug abuse and jail time, Doherty simply started another band, the Baby Shambles, in 2003.
I long for a mediocre gig.
But his addiction didn't just affect his relationships, it affected his bottom line. In 2007, the Evening Standard reported that despite earning millions with the Libertines and his recent Baby Shambles album selling 100,000 copies, Doherty was, quote, on the verge of bankruptcy. While it was assumed his addictions didn't help financial matters, his investments hadn't done well either, and all the money was seemingly gone.
It was all part of a way of life that I was locked into, you know?
Fortunately, he'd managed to snag supermodel Kate Moss around the way, and her millions were keeping him afloat at the time. But Moss was long gone by 2010, when The Sun claimed that the rocker was, quote, completely broke and living in a basement apartment. Fact or tabloid fiction, Doherty was done. That is, until he formed a new band, Peter Doherty and the Madres. Courtney Love is a successful rocker in her own right, but her real money comes from her late husband Kurt Cobain's publishing rights. Yet she told The Fix that after Cobain died, she lost track of the money, claiming, "I was doing drugs from the moment I woke up till the time I went to bed. I was out of it most of the time." By the time she realized what was happening, she was totally broke. She and daughter Frances moved in with Love's stepfather, and she claims they didn't even have enough money to eat. Then in 2013, according to Clash Music, Love again said she was near bankruptcy because money had been taken from her accounts.
I think betting against me is probably not a good move, just because I tend to get what I want.
However, as the outlet noted, there has been controversy over her claims of so-called poverty. In a 2009 court filing, Frances claimed that her mother was obsessed with uncovering fraud and spends much of her day raging about the fraud that has been perpetrated on her. What's definitely true, however, is that Love has trouble paying taxes. The Blast reported that the IRS came after her for non-payment of hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2009, 2011, 2012, and 2016. The last bill was for the largest one yet, over $500,000. When Tom Petty filed for bankruptcy in 1979, it was a strategic choice. Petty was the first artist to figure out how to legally say he had no money to get out of a bad recording contract. As history reported, the music industry is, quote, notorious for its creative accounting practices, and that can mean a very successful act might somehow have no money or perhaps owes their label tons of cash.
This is why people find me difficult sometimes, but it makes perfect sense to me.
Right.
In 1979, Petty found himself with 2 hit albums, numerous hit singles, and what he thought was an unfair cut of the sales due to a bad contract he claims he signed against his will. So he completed a 3rd album, which he financed himself, but refused to let the record company release it. This left him $500,000 in debt, and he filed for bankruptcy. According to Rolling Stone in 1980, Petty's record label sued him and refused to let him perform in concert. Petty filing for bankruptcy and announcing he'd only made $36,000 the previous year was also very embarrassing for the label. Billboard reports this strategy was concerning to the record industry since other artists might follow suit, so the label folded, offering the broke Petty an attractive $3 million contract. In 1984, Mick Fleetwood filed for bankruptcy, which was absurd since he had founded Fleetwood Mac 17 years prior. It's also important to note that according to Paste in 2018, Fleetwood Mac's Rumors was the 7th best-selling album of all time. Part of the problem was that as the drummer, Fleetwood didn't write any of the band's songs, so he made the least amount of everyone, according to The Telegraph. In '84, his lawyer was also quick to point out that Fleetwood was not blowing money on drugs. Or was he?
I never took anything, quote, in the opiate area, booze and cocaine.
But he was definitely up to his neck in real estate. Fleetwood bought and then quickly sold property in Australia and, quote, took a bath on the transactions financially. Then he bought a mansion and took out a huge loan when interest rates were at their peak. As Fleetwood Mac band members took time off for solo projects, his yearly income plummeted to only a couple of $100,000. Then there were the various investments that flopped. In 2014, Fleetwood told The Telegraph he'd lost count of how many times he'd filed for bankruptcy. David Crosby saw huge success with two legendary bands, the Byrds and supergroup Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and sometimes Young.
You know, yes, we did good singing, yes, we did good guitar playing, but the key was we had songs that made you feel something.
But that all fell apart in the 80s. Ultimate Classic Rock reported Crosby's first run-in with the law happened when he crashed his car while on cocaine. He also had a concealed weapon on him. Then just 3 weeks later, he was busted with more cocaine and a gun in a nightclub where he was performing. According to the LA Times, the conviction was overturned on appeal, but then in 1984, Crosby got 3 years probation for driving on a suspended license while drunk. A year later, he crashed his car again and was charged with possession of a concealed pistol and narcotics paraphernalia and hit-and-run driving.
I remember trading a 1939 herringbone dreadnought, stunner, for substance.
Eventually, Crosby did hard time, with Bankrate reporting that in 1985, he filed for bankruptcy. When he got out of jail, he was so broke he had to live in a friend's spare bedroom and borrow his clothes. In 2003, Crosby told the outlet that he estimated he'd burned through $25 million over the course of his career. He eventually made his money back by continuing to work, but CNN reported that he was arrested for possessing a gun and drugs yet again in 2004.
Rock stars are cute. They got nice haircuts, but I'm more into just working hard, playing hard, making great music, and going hunting.
These days, Ted Nugent is known for his opinions on guns, his vocal support of Donald Trump, and even for visiting the White House with Sarah Palin and Kid Rock. But he's first and foremost a successful rock star. He also seemed to care about his money, calling his accountant, quote, kick-ass in a 1979 Rolling Stone interview, saying that the guy got a, quote, sensual thrill out of doing Nugent's books. But in that same interview, the reporter watched Nugent quickly sign a packet of bonus checks for his employees, totaling $87,000 in 1979. Nugent claimed he paid everyone handsomely, from his musicians, roadies, agents, and accountants to the farmers on his mink ranch.
And people wonder why I have this attitude.
According to Texas Monthly, within a year of that Rolling Stone interview, Nugent was bankrupt. The mink farm, as well as other esoteric investments like a hotel in Flint, Michigan, and a herd of Clydesdales had been failures. But these days, it seems like he's not dwelling on the past.
I'm having the time of my life. And someday someone will acknowledge that these are some of the greatest rock and roll songs ever written.
In the mid-'80s, Twisted Sister was riding high with a quadruple platinum album and crazy music videos that went viral well before YouTube. And Dee Snider, as the main songwriter, was making a ton of money, according to Hard Rock Daddy. But then he was called before the Senate to defend his violent music videos. In order to get politicians on his side, Snider mentioned he was a teetotaling family man who never drank, smoked, or did drugs.
I don't advocate sexism, the use of drugs, and drinking. So I don't write about those things. I only write about things I believe in.
That statement ruined his credibility with his fans, and Twisted Sister was over. Radar Online reported this dramatic fall resulted in Snider filing for bankruptcy. He told Fox News that by 1995 he was, quote, flat broke, claiming that unlike other bankrupt musicians, he didn't have a drug problem or a corrupt manager he could blame for his financial problems. Snider said at that point he couldn't even afford to buy his kids a piece of candy. Although, thanks to nostalgia and time on Broadway, he's since bounced back financially.
So we might as well start at the beginning, which I guess...
Why?
Well,
because... It's much better to start at the end and go backwards.
At one point in rock history, Meat Loaf was massive. His 1977 album Bat Out of Hell was one of the best-selling in pop history, according to the LA Times. But his record company lied to him about just how many albums he was actually selling, so the money wasn't rolling in like it should have been.
I never make anything look easy, and I don't ever let anything be easy.
Loaf said he suspected his sales were being lowballed during the 80s, but it wasn't until the early 90s, when accounting technology got better, that he could prove it, estimating that his record company owed him $14 million in 1996-era money. And all that cash would have come in really handy for Loaf in the early 80s. In 1983, Loaf's publisher and manager, among others, sued him with 22 separate lawsuits for $85 million total, and they wiped him out. Having filed for Chapter 11, Loaf claims he lost his home and even the publishing rights to his songs. When they first started out, the Goo Goo Dolls were so desperate for a record deal, they were basically willing to sign any contract. After releasing a couple of albums in the late 80s, the band signed with Metal Blade Records. They would later claim in a lawsuit, according to Billboard, that the company, quote, exploited their naivete and got them to sign an unfair contract, one that saw them, quote, sign away most of their royalty rights. This meant that while they toiled away trying to make it, the band members all still held down part-time jobs. But then in '95, their smash hit album A Boy Named Goo came out. Led by the single Name, it sold millions of copies. The band should have been rolling in it, except the money never came. Each member got a measly $6,000 a year from their label.
Maybe this wasn't such a good idea.
Unable to pay the bills, they went on tour for 2 years. It wasn't always fun for them, like when they joined up with Bush and No Doubt. An experience one member said was like having a dentist enter through your ass to pull your wisdom teeth out. So they sued their label. They won and signed a much better contract, but there were still money issues, like when the drummer left over financial disagreements.
I feel like there's more out there.
Out where?
Everywhere. Whatever's out there, let's find it.
Check out one of our newest videos right here. Plus, even more grunge videos about your favorite stars are coming soon. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you don't miss a single one.